It's time for Prove All Things, a Bible discussion program on the Word of God. A panel of preachers will deal with your questions and comments. Prove all things, hold fast that which is good, abstain from all appearance of evil, and the very God of peace sanctify you wholly. All right, now we're on the air. Engineer Dave has abandoned us again, claiming he has a life. Actually, he's coaching I think they're 5 and 6-year-old softball teams, so you can imagine how exciting that is. And we have tonight Engineer Jason, which if we made it on the air, you can let us know, because that is going to be a signal accomplishment of Engineer Jason.
This is Jason's debut performance.
His debut here tonight.
His debut performance.
He's over there sweating bullets, looking nervous, lest we throw things at him. But anyway, this is Prove All Things, and we missed last week. Engineer Dave does have some, let me see if I can explain what's happened. A lot of our kids, because of the COVID scare, didn't play baseball this summer. A lot of the little kids, Little League. So they have all begun playing in our neighborhood. I think late August maybe, and into September and October. I think they're going to play in October. So, which is unusual around here. If you're down in Alabama or Texas, somewhere, that's not a big deal. But around here, that's a big deal. We don't usually do that. So Engineer Dave is out, as I said, coaching a 6-year-old girls softball team. And probably is finishing up right about now, but he knew he couldn't get this program on the air. So he might even make an appearance here along about halfway through, so we can blackguard him and do other things. Yes, I hear we are on YouTube. One caller texted me. Is Facebook lively over there?
Yes, it is.
Oh, good.
We have both platforms.
So we said to Engineer Dave that he doesn't get to keep us off the air forever just because he's got a life. And so he has put Engineer Jason through a crash course, and he is over there manning the console tonight. And you'll probably be glad I'm not manning the console, because I can barely talk and chew gum at the same time. So we're glad he's doing that. This is Prove All Things. This is number 224. I think today's the first day of fall, if I'm not mistaken,
yes,
isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Here, if you...
This is number 225, by the way.
Oh, did I miss a number?
You did.
Is this that program we never made it on, you're counting?
I'm just looking at the number that got printed up there. So
Okay, 225 then.
So if they're looking on Facebook and they see number 225, this is it.
Another caller wrote me and said we are actually on Facebook too.
Yes, we are.
So we are successful tonight. Who needs Engineer Dave?
We don't
want to tell him that too much, or he never will show up again.
Yeah.
Anyway,
if Jason does too good a job, he may never be back.
That's right.
Oh, we got a well done Jason from Brian's.
Ooh.
So hey, applause.
We will follow on YouTube. We will follow the chat conversations on these things. On YouTube, you can comment. There's a button there somewhere you can punch and start commenting, and one of these guys will tell me what that comment is. And of course on Facebook, everybody knows how to comment on Facebook. Somebody will tell me what the comment is. Any Bible question, any Bible comment. If you would like us on Facebook, that would be swell, because maybe some other people might see that you liked us, and you might even share the program on Facebook so other people could see it. Program's brought to you by the High School Road Church of Christ, 3103 North High School Road here in Indianapolis, Indiana. And we're looking forward to talking with you quite a bit. We were off last week, as I told you, because Engineer Dave had a life. But anyway, we are back on now. I think Engineer Dave is also, his wife had to go to a business conference, and I think she's in the air on the way right now, so he's also going to be babysitting for his 4 children, so Engineer Dave has a full plate here these days.
Hoorah.
And my guest tonight, you probably heard his voice a time or two over there, is Alan McKee. We didn't want to have a third guy on because we didn't want to test Engineer Jason's proclivities too far on this first one.
That could be an interesting challenge to switch. And,
yeah.
And it'd be better to have better to let Jason kind of get his
feet wet.
Get his feet wet. Kind of get his experience under his belt, if you will, and then
there you go.
And then we'll ramp it up.
There you go.
Rapidly.
How are you?
I'm well tonight. I'm really very well. I love this time of year. I love the fall.
Yeah, isn't today the first day of fall?
Today is the first day of fall. I love this change of seasons. I wish it was even yet a little cooler. It's
freezing to death.
Freezing to death. It's 80 degrees outside.
Yeah, not in the morning. You obviously don't get up very early.
Well, I get up very early in the morning, and I love that brisk 50-degree air hitting my bare arms. I love it.
Yeah, well, my wife likes it too. She's been trying to freeze me out, opening the window.
Yeah, my wife sleeps with the windows open.
Oh,
so
my God. My goodness.
So we got it all night long.
There you go. We've talked about this debate on preterism. We've got a sort of tentative date that we have set. I think there's still some checking to be done, and who knows what the future is going to hold. Whether the government's going to shut us down again, I hope not. But anyway, we suggested a date in March of next year. The date will be the week of the 14th of March. That will be on the 15th, 16th, 18th, and 19th. That's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And this will be at the High School Road Church of Christ, 3103 North High School Road. John Watson, preterist preacher here in Indianapolis, and myself. And that's not written in stone just yet, so don't schedule airline tickets or anything. But that's proceeding. I wanted to let you know that that's proceeding apace a bit. Have we got any questions on there? Any comments yet? No. They're all placid tonight.
Yeah, we've got just a bunch of. Well, I'm here and I'm listening, but no.
Okay, well that's good. That's
no.
That's better than the opposite.
No pithy questions.
No pithies. Let's go to our
old questions.
Yes, we got one. I'm just about to try it up. Are you ready, Jason, for this? All right. Let's see. Here we go. I got to see if I can get it going. Hold on. I'm going to flip a few switches myself. Make sure it's loud enough to hear. Yes, that sounded good.
Is there anywhere in the Bible where Jesus' physical appearance is described, or as with that, is there anything in any of the other literature from that time that actually described what Jesus looked like?
Okay, what did Jesus look like, Alan?
Good question. The best answer I can think of is the verse that's coming to my mind, but I don't know where it is. I'll have to look it up. But it talks about that he had no comeliness. He had no, in other words, exceptional attractiveness that would draw people. And perhaps you're familiar with that verse?
Yes, I am.
I gotta think of where it is.
It's Isaiah 53.
Ah, okay.
And as soon as my computer catches up with me, we'll get there. And that's Isaiah 53, verse 2. He grew up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of a dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness, and when we see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. He was desired and rejected of men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. As one from whom men hide their face, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. So, all those pictures of this gorgeous, sometimes I think he might be Anglo-Saxon, gorgeous guy
with
the
chestnut hair and blue eyes.
Yeah, with the flowing hair. That may not be true. Most of that stuff came from, I would say, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, when they were painting religious pictures, and somehow the models they used all were that sort of people, and exactly what he looked like, of course, we don't know. We don't know what any of those people back there looked like. There are some busts and statues of Roman generals and emperors and so forth, but I wouldn't assume that they were there. But there aren't any statues that I know of Jews. I think they had a sort of rule against that sort of thing, that sort of representation. So, no, I don't know what Jesus looked like.
We don't. The way he's described there, though, in Isaiah, would sort of make sense. If he had some sort of extraordinary appearance in some way, if he was maybe unusually strong or unusually handsome or something like that. That might have, there might have been people that would have been struck by that aspect of him rather than by his doctrine. And I don't think he wanted people to be struck by his appearance or by his physical attributes. He wanted them to be listening to him because of his words.
Well, yeah, that's the point that's always made in the New Testament.
Yes.
Is that people marveled at what he said.
Yes.
They didn't ever say, "Wow, did you see that good-looking guy from Galilee?" And he was preaching that. That was never the emphasis. The emphasis was on, our heart burned within us, and nobody ever spoke like he did.
He speaks with authority, and things like that.
Yeah, he speaks with authority. It was always about what he said.
Yes.
And not.
And I think that was deliberate on God's part, to make him effectively a plain guy. I mean, just sort of an ordinary man, in that sense, an ordinary man, of having no particular, again, physical attributes. He was not a supernatural strength like Samson. He was not, some of the Bible does speak of other men as being exceptionally good looking. For example, Absalom, David's son, is written as being an exceptionally handsome man. And Jesus is not written that way. Jesus is not described in that way. And so all we went to see is, all we have is, just that description of him by his words and by his deeds, and not of his physical attributes.
Jesus talks about that in Matthew 11. But he's talking about John the Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, when John heard in the prison the works of Christ, he sent by his disciples and said to him, "Art thou he that should come, or look we for another?" Now skip down with me to verse 7. And these went their way. Jesus began to say unto the multitudes concerning John, "What went ye out in the wilderness to behold? A reed shaken with the wind? What went ye out to see? A man clothed in soft raiment? Behold, they that wear soft raiment are in kings' houses." And I think the idea of that for John and Jesus was that they weren't princely. They weren't trying to be commanding by their clothing or their demeanor or by their appearance.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, were you raising a hand at me? Okay. What do you got?
There's a question.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Are you picking up in your mic? No. Oh. Somebody's got to pick up in a mic. What do you got?
Here's Ed Rangel asking, he says, a time ago I asked about Hebrews 2, 1 through 8. But in verse 9 and following, it seems like the subject is different. Man in the first verses and Jesus in the second section. What say you? So if we look at Hebrews, the second chapter, and we look at verses 1 through 8, and see what it says, and then verses 9 and going forward, what do we discern about the topic, the subjects of those sections? So
Okay, well,
we'll get there and have a look. Ed,
to do 1 through 8, you're going to have to go back and to do Hebrews 2, 1 through 8. You're going to have to go back to Hebrews 1. And there, at the end of Hebrews 1, he's talking about the angels. Unto which of the angels hath he said at any time, sit thou on my right hand till I make thine enemies thy footstool? He goes on then talking about the angels. Are they not all ministering spirits, sent forth to do service for the sake of them that shall inherit salvation? And then in 2, 1 through 4, it's usually considered to be an interjection, and which vaguely mentions the angels in verse 2 as the message that was delivered in the Old Testament, and how greater message was there. But in 5, he continues the remarks about the angels, which he began back in chapter 1. Unto the angels, not unto the angels did he subject the world to come, but one hath somewhere testified, saying, and this is in the Psalms, what is man that thou art mindful of him? And the point being that the angels were not put in charge of this world back over in Genesis. Alan, if you're there, you can go back there quickly, maybe, or I can go back there quickly, I suppose. Let me get back to Genesis, the first chapter, and we'll see what he says there at the end of that first chapter. He says, verse 28, God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish, the birds, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. So there is that simple idea of dominion that's being carried forward here in Hebrews 2. I'm bouncing around here. Let's see if I can get to where I want to be.
I'm going to go to Psalms 8, John.
Go ahead.
And read that, because this passage is quoting Psalms 8.
Mm-hmm.
That Psalms, I'm going to back up to the beginning of it. O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is your name in all the earth, who has set your glory above the heavens. Out of the mouth of babes and infants have you ordained strength because of your enemies, that you might still the enemy and the avenger. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have ordained, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you visit him? For you have made him a little lower than the angels, and have crowned him with glory and honor. You have made him to have dominion over the works of your hands, and you have put all things under his feet.
Okay, through verse 8.
Yeah.
He's talking about this principle, this thing that was established back in Psalms 8 and in Genesis 1, that man was given dominion. But he says in verse 8, in that he subjected all things unto him, he left nothing not subject. But now we see not yet all things subjected to him. So he says man by himself has not been able to accomplish the fulfillment of that passage in Genesis 1 and in Psalms 8. So then he goes on to explain in verse 9, continuing from that, how Jesus was the fulfillment of those statements. He says, we behold him who hath been made a little lower than the angels. He was made like a man, Jesus, because of the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that by the grace of God he should taste death for every man. For it became him, of whom are all things, through whom are all things, and bringing his Son to make the author of their salvation perfect through suffering. And if you know and I'm sure you know the rest of chapter 2, he shows that Jesus was a man, and it was by his deeds and action and death for us that he actually finally had fulfilled that statement in Genesis 1, the statement in Psalms 8, especially look at verse 14. He says, so then the children are sharers in flesh and blood. He also himself in like manner partook of the same, that through death he might bring to naught him that had the power of death. That's what the one thing remaining that needed to be subjected was. Him that had the power of death, that is the devil, and deliver all of them who through fear of death were all their lifetimes subject to bondage. So what he's saying is that Christ had completed that prophecy in Genesis 1 and the statement in Psalms 8 that all things would be subdued to man. And Jesus, man without Jesus, had not accomplished it. The angels, the angels had not been included in the prophecies about it, which he repeats again, by the way, in verse 16. Go ahead.
No, you covered it. I was going to bring up verse 14. You got there before I did.
Oh, excuse me.
That's all right. I was going to bring up that verse 14 in virtually the same way you did, that he is partaker. I like this translation. We are partakers of flesh and blood, as he himself also took part of the same, that he might destroy him who has the power of death, that is the devil. And, the King James says bring to naught. I like the idea of destroy.
There you go.
I like that. I like that imagery a little bit more. So, that was the point, is that man by himself had no such power, had no such ability. It required the Son of God giving himself as a sacrifice to be able to accomplish this goal.
There you go. Okay, do we have anything else over there? Yes, sir.
Gloria comments.
Yeah.
Gloria called?
Comment.
What did she say?
She says, I see a lot of comments about COVID.
What? Okay, COVID.
Hey, I just read them.
Is this a Bible question?
Yes.
Okay.
The fact that services are canceled at many places has some folks saying you don't need to go to church. The claim is that we just don't need a building or an assembly place. The statement is made that we worship whether there or not. And stops there. It's a statement. It's more a comment than a question.
Well, whoever's saying that hasn't read the Bible very well.
Well, I agree with that. The folks that are discounting the Bible. We started, for those of you who are interested in such things, we started a study in the Sunday morning Bible class in 1 Timothy this past Sunday. But one of the things we pointed out there was the theme of the book of Timothy, of that first letter to Timothy. The theme of it is the protection of the truth, protection of the word. And in chapter 3 and verse, I think, 15, it tells us that the church is the pillar and ground of the truth. And therefore, if you're going to say, well, I believe in God and I'm following the truth, but you're not, associating with the church, then you're ignoring the pillar and ground of the truth. How is it that you're going to claim to know the truth when you're ignoring the pillar and ground of it?
Okay, if you're saying that the church doesn't need to assemble, assembly implies a place, by the way. We can argue two things. We can argue assembly, and then if you want to, we can argue place. But the two really sort of go hand in hand. It's hard to assemble without being in a place. But I'd like for you to look at 1 Corinthians 11, verse 17. Here it's worded in the negative to condemn them. He says, "In giving you this charge, I praise you not, that ye come together not for the better, but for the worse. When ye come together in the church, I hear that divisions exist among you." What's that? Come together in the church? Then in verse 20, "When therefore ye assemble yourselves together," it's not possible to eat the Lord's Supper. Why? Well, they were busy. They wouldn't do it as a group. They wouldn't do it as a body. So, he goes on to say that at length throughout this. Again, in verse 33, he says, "Wherefore, my brethren, when ye come together to eat, wait for one another." They were to take the Lord's Supper. They were not to eat a common meal. Now, you can see the same thing over in chapter 14, where he talks about the same sort of thing. Which I want you to notice. He says, let me find my place where I want to start reading. He says in verse, let's start with verse 16. "What is it then? I will pray with the Spirit, I'll pray with the understanding also. I'll sing with the Spirit, I'll sing with the understanding also. Else, if thou bless with the Spirit, how shall he that filleth the place of the unlearned say amen?" There's a place. And he goes on to say, in the church, in verse 19, "In the church, I'd rather speak 5 words with my understanding." What's the church? Now, just keep coming down with me and notice verse 23. "If therefore the whole church be assembled together," same thing as you saw in chapter 11. There's the assembly, the coming together. Notice again verse 26. "What is it then, brethren, when ye come together?" You know, this whole idea of staying home and watching on TV isn't come together. You're not together. This was to be the assembly of the church. Now, you can go on throughout this 14th chapter and see the same sort of things, but you can notice some other places. You've probably, if you've been a member of the church for any period of time, you've noticed Acts 20 and verse 7, "Upon the first day of the week when we were gathered together to break bread." There's the example of what the church did in partaking of the Lord's Supper. In 1 Corinthians, the 16th chapter, concerning the collection for the saints, "As I've gave order to the churches of Galatia, so do it. Upon the first day of the week, let each one of you lay by him in store, that as he may prosper, that no collections be made." So there was a collection from each one. It wasn't, I'm going to stick this in my piggy bank at home. There was a collection to be made on the first day of the week. So here's the biblical example of churches assembling. They didn't assemble in the ether. They assembled in reality. And so if you're going to do things in the New Testament way, if you're going to be like the New Testament church, well, why not start doing it and quit trying to say, "I'm going to stay in my PJs at home and worship in that fashion." It's a shame and a disgrace what some Christians have tried to do during this period of disaster. And I think it's a disgrace, by the way, also because of the way some of the governments have forbidden churches to meet. Something I don't believe they had any right to do. That's just an opinion. Well, yeah, they didn't have any right to do. The Lord says, the Lord speaking to us says, "Whether it be right in the sight of man to hearken unto you more than unto God, judge ye. We cannot but speak the things which we've seen and heard." So, yes. Now, there's a lot of churches that went a long way out of their way to try to figure out some way to assemble, to try to appease the government. But it was an assembly. It wasn't just staying home and watching on the tube. Now I've had my say. I'll get off my soapbox.
Well, back to Ed, who says, "So in verse 1 through 8 it is man, and in verse 9 and afterward it's Jesus." So yeah, I think that's pretty accurate, Ed. I think that's pretty much the statement that verses 1 through 8 deal with the inability of man, even though he was made. Well, it says he's made a little lower than the angels, yet given dominion. But it was man by himself was incapable of bringing about salvation that required the sacrifice of Jesus Christ.
Ed, I would say that you're painting with a little too broad a brush. I think 1 through 4 is as you know, Paul does this on several occasions, is an interjection into the theme concerning angels and men that started back there in that first chapter and then is really taken up again in the 5th verse and on following throughout the 2nd chapter.
And then,
But yeah,
and then Gloria again says elders are commenting that they just don't know what to do because members don't want to come out to worship. Well, I sympathize with that. I certainly do. I know we've seen it in our own congregation where we get a pretty healthy crowd on Sunday morning, and by Sunday night, it's dwindled down to maybe a third of what it was. And
it's not my place to do anything about another guy. His conscience is going to have to be guided by the Word of God, just like mine is. But if Joe Dokes chooses not to worship, he'll have to answer to the Lord. I've been around the block many times. I've heard some of the most pitiful excuses imaginable for not worshiping the Lord. And I put a lot of this in the same category. I know at High School Road we tried really hard. We met in the parking lot in our cars so we could stay separated, but we were all there. We could wave to one another in the parking lot. We were assembled, at least in that sense. But we were all together in that sense. None of us liked it very much. I didn't like it very much. But it was doable. I know a lot of other churches did the same thing or similar things, but the church is to come together. And you can't get around those verses, and you can't let the government tell you you can't come together. You know, in the New Testament times and afterward, Christians were forbidden to assemble by the Roman government, and they met in graves, in the catacombs, down there among the dead bodies, in order to continue worshiping the Lord. And we've gotten better than that, apparently. We don't have to do that, which I think is shameful. But that's just my opinion. I'd be glad to.
well,
The lines are open. You can.
I'll toss you a question.
Okay.
This is Revelation 21 and verse 8. And it says, but the fearful, the unbelieving, and the abominable, the murderers, and fornicators, and sorcerers, and idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. When it talks about the fearful there, fearful in what sense? Are we talking about, maybe we're talking about these folks who are fearful of serving the Lord because of some real or imagined danger? Or, I wondered about that, thinking that if we're going to say, well, I can't worship God because I'm afraid, are we in this category? Then
Well,
perhaps we are.
What if the government, if there was no disease whatsoever, the government just didn't want you to meet and said,
Yeah,
if you meet, we'll throw you in jail, or we'll beat you, or
yeah.
we'll kill you.
Mm-hmm.
You gonna not meet?
There have been Christians facing that
Yeah,
exact question.
yeah. So you're gonna have to figure that one out. Now, it may be you had to go into hiding. A lot of them went into hiding. They didn't just lash out in public. They went into hiding and they worshiped the Lord. They remembered his death. They took the Lord's Supper and studied his word. And I think as near as we could, we needed to try to do that. Every congregation needed to try to do that. And anyway, I've said it. I'm not going to repeat it 15 times for you, but the Bible says the church gathers together.
Yep.
So, is there any, if you don't agree with us, my goodness, say something. I understand there's a lot of people who found a lot of excuses to not gather together. So, I could understand during this time everybody was scared to death. That's the fearful, but there were people who were. I can't think of my word. They were challenged physically. They had a greater propensity. Somebody of my advanced age, for instance, or older, and who had various illnesses which the COVID would have attacked even harder. And perhaps it would have been wise, if you're sick or there's a possibility that you might be sick. It would be wise to stay home, but all the brethren are not so. I think, say something for a while. I'm going to look up a passage that I can't just bring to mind here, Alan.
One commentator or commenter, if I may, suggests that when we were talking about Jesus and his appearance, that there was a mention of plucking his beard. That's actually not in the New Testament. There is no reference to plucking beards in the New Testament at all. The only reference I know of it in the Old Testament was with Nehemiah, who in the book of Nehemiah was grabbing hold of those men's beards and pulling out their hairs because they were refusing to give up their foreign wives. And other acts of misbehavior. And so Nehemiah, understanding that pain can be a pretty strong motivator, got a hold of their beards and began yanking. But that's the only place I know about even in the Old Testament. There is no mention of plucking beards in the New Testament. We have no idea if Jesus was clean shaven or if he was bearded, or it's likelihood he was bearded given the custom of the time and given the probably the lack of a good safety razor. But
Not in all the pictures. In all the pictures, he shaved every day.
No, a lot of the pictures I've seen show him with a
beard.
Well, with like a little kind of like
a goatee.
Not exactly a goatee. I would call it a Van Dyke type beard.
Really?
Yeah.
Woohoo!
Yeah, kind of a European style dandy beard,
Okay.
Which again I don't think so, but again we have no mention in the New Testament that Jesus had a beard, either plus or positive or negative.
To get back to the topic we were talking about, I wanted you to look at a passage in the Old Testament. This is in Proverbs 26. And I'm going to start reading in verse 5. This whole thing's talking about the fool. Verse 5 says, "Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. He that sendeth a message by the hand of a fool cutteth off the feet and drinketh damage. The legs of the lame are not equal. So is a parable in the mouth of fools. As he that bindeth a stone in a sling, so is he that giveth honor to a fool. As a thorn goeth up into the hand of a drunkard, so is a parable in the mouth of fools. The great God that formed all things both rewardeth the fool and rewardeth transgressors. As a dog returneth to his vomit, so a fool returneth to his folly. Seest thou a man wise in his own conceit? There's more hope of a fool than him." But now here's what I wanted you to see. "The slothful man saith, There's a lion in the way, a lion in the street. As the door turneth upon his hinges, so doth the slothful upon his bed." Here's the lazy man who says, oh, there's a disease out there. I can't go to worship. I can't go to church. I've got to stay home and be safe. There's a lion out there. Well, yeah, there are dangers out there. Some friends lost, some friends of my son lost two of their children this week in a airplane crash. There's automobile crashes daily here in Indianapolis. There's shootings. We've heard of somebody who was murdered on High School Road. I don't think it was close to the church, but High School Road goes a long way. But
it was close. It was two blocks away.
Was it really?
The 3,000 block. And we're at what, 32?
Yeah, I thought it was down in Washington, near Washington.
No, I thought it was the 3,000 block unless it was a misprint.
Well, we'll argue over that.
All right, we'll do that.
But anyway,
I've got
there's a lion out there. There's gangsters and so forth. The Lord said we should worship. He said we should gather together with the saints. And now we want to do that in the most careful way imaginable. Here at High School Road, we're all wearing masks now, as everybody here in Indianapolis is supposed to be doing. And we're trying to socially distance. And we're careful about how we take the supper. We're still not back to our traditional way. We take it in a sealed container that nobody, at least among us, has touched. I don't know whether anybody touched it where they sealed it. But we're trying to be as careful as we can in those regards. But we're going to meet. As I say, we met for a while in the parking lot. And took the supper and remembered the Lord. Anyway, and if you disagree with this, my goodness, speak up. But I don't believe those passages are modifiable. What? What do you got? I can't see.
Says, woman died of a shooting on the west side of Indianapolis.
Oh my goodness. You're back to that.
Yeah.
Okay, we got another question over there. Engineer Dave has joined us.
We're saved.
No, we're not. Engineer Jason
is fine.
Yeah, Jason's doing a better job.
Go home, Dave.
All right.
No. You don't get to leave. What do you got, Jason? Wait a minute. Have you got your microphone turned on?
No.
Nobody can hear you until you turn your microphone on.
Yeah, it's from Brian Sullivan. He says, is Isaiah 50 verse 6 messianic?
50 and 6.
Yes.
Is it messianic?
Yeah.
Okay. Alan, you'll probably get there. See. Well, it is or didn't. I ain't dead air. 50 and 6 says, I gave my back to the smiters and my cheek to them that plucked off my hair. I hid not my face for shame and spitting. I think he's back to that.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say, it wasn't mentioned in the New Testament, but he may have found a verse in the Old Testament. I don't know, although I don't know. Is this
I don't think so. I don't believe it is. It's talking about Israel generally. Verse 1, for instance, where's the bill of your mother's divorcement whom I have put away? Which of my creditors it is to whom I have sold you? So the general theme of this is referencing Israel.
Okay. So it may not be specific to Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it may not be specific to Jesus.
Case, yes.
But I think he was going back to that plucked off the hair thing.
Yeah.
So
he's not going to give that up.
But anyway, I'd be glad to hear somebody else tell me something different about Isaiah 50. I don't know. There's nothing in here that's quoted in the New Testament, to my knowledge, to indicate. I don't believe it is. I don't believe any of this is quoted in the New Testament to indicate that it is messianic, but that isn't necessarily proof that it isn't messianic. So, well, I would ask you boys who won tonight, but anyway. What else? Have we got anything else up there? What do you got, Alan? Quit looking up who got shot.
I've given that up. I'm trying to look for any other comments or anything.
There's one on Facebook.
There's something on Facebook. Well, somebody tell me what it is, since I'm not looking at Facebook.
I'm back.
Oh,
All right.
hello, Engineer Dave.
Hello. From
Or you're not Engineer Dave tonight. You're Interlocutor Dave.
I'm reading here. Cindy writes, there is a very real threat to some for the virus. If you want to judge those who are not attending because they are concerned they will get sick, maybe there will be judgment for those who attended when they were sick and therefore caused others to become ill unnecessarily. Not all are consistently or correctly wearing masks, so potential is still there for the illness to spread.
That's perhaps true. We have tried to say as much as we can, if you have disease in your person, you ought to stay away. You know, I think I'm probably the one to say that, since my mother died largely because of COVID. So I'm okay on that. But people, we should be careful. If you think you're ill, don't infect everybody else. Not just about COVID. My goodness, if you've got any number of diseases, please keep them to yourself. But and there are some people I mentioned earlier that are especially in danger because of their age and health conditions, that perhaps want to be careful and keep a bigger isolation from others. But at some point we need to assemble with the saints. Now, at some point, and that's not up to me to determine, by the way. At some point, you would have to say that there are those who are providentially hindered, and that's not up for me to decide. That's up for the individual to decide. But to argue that the church should meet and that all Christians should stay home and not obey the commands of the Lord, that's a little push too far.
I mean, I understand. I understand where Cindy's coming from, and I can understand her point of view. I can be sympathetic to her point of view, but I also wonder, though, about those Christians who, come Sunday morning, are saying, "Oh, I can't go to church. It's this virus and all," and yet they're going out to the grocery store, or they're going out to Walmart, or one event or another, or they're going to work, or something like that, and somehow they're making a distinction between going to church and attending services and worshiping God and their other day-to-day activities, all of which seem to involve interaction with people. So, yeah, if you are concerned, you are worried about getting out into a crowd and getting the virus, you're quite right. There are folks that are very sensitive to this, as we know. Your mother had it badly. My wife had it badly, and given that circumstance, yes, it would have been good for them to stay home, maybe, or take precautions, or whatever, or both. Again, I do wonder about the person who can live a life normal, just go about his daily business, and yet somehow on Sunday morning, oh, I can't go because of the virus.
Yeah.
It's that attitude that bothers me.
There's a lion in the streets.
Yes. Yes. Excuse me.
I think most of the folks at High School Road are worshiping. We do have one or two members who are especially vulnerable to the disease,
Yes.
that have chosen to stay home, and I can understand their decision. They have a vulnerability and so forth. But to say that everybody, that's true of everyone, and that the fact that it's supposedly true of everyone means that we should deny the Lord's command to remember His death and His blood is hard for me to accept. In fact, it's impossible. My life is nothing compared to the sacrifice He made for me. And I'll do my best to try to remember it. And we were told to remember it when the church came together, not while we all hovered in our closet. Anyway, any other comments? Be glad to hear from you otherwise. I think some of the points that Cindy makes are valid.
Indeed, yes.
But the whole notion that the church shouldn't meet is not valid. It's not scriptural. So that's whether to attend or not attend is a decision for each individual, and it's not up for me necessarily to decide whether or not they're doing right or wrong. I think that in some instances there should be some serious conscientious searching. But that's true on many occasions. Whether, in fact, I think I've preached that quite a bit before there was any COVID out there. There's a lot of folks that stay away from church for some really strange reasons. But anyway, we got time for one quick comment from somebody. We got anything else there?
I have not seen anything else.
Okay. We satisfied everybody?
I have not seen any additional.
How amazing.
So,
Just got one from Larry.
Go ahead.
I'll let you.
Jason. Turn your mic up, Jason.
Larry says, to sum up, the more we stay away from assembly, the more opportunity to drift slowly away.
I think I've seen that. I think I've seen that quite a bit. And it is true. The more you stay away from the assembly, the easier it is to stay away and to justify that. And I think that's what our original commenter was saying to some extent, is it becomes easier, and there's a lot of people who are beginning to justify the uselessness of the church per se and the assembly of the church, that we don't even need to have a building, we can just all watch on the TV. And this is poorly thought out, and it comes about from a protracted failure for the church to assemble. You know, how do you, if the church isn't going to assemble, how do you tell people it's important to assemble? Is it important as long as, does God expect us to assemble or not? You have to answer that question. We've argued about the necessity of baptism, and we argue about the necessity of singing. But the same passages, the same number of passages, I suppose, talk about the importance of assembly. Go ahead. We got just enough time to sneak it in.
Cindy also asks, she says, not all churches have a Sunday evening or Wednesday service. When did that start? I enjoy meeting at all services that are offered, but are they to all be held in the same regard?
The I don't. You asked me when did it start? I don't know when it started. The church makes the opportunity on the Lord's Day for everyone who is a Christian. We assemble so that as many as possible can assemble with us and partake of the supper with us. And so sometimes we meet twice, and I've been in churches where they would meet 3 or 4 times in order to make sure that they meet so that everyone can participate. And I think that a lot of them justify it by that passage in 1 Corinthians 11 that says you should tarry one for another. On Wednesday night, Churches of Christ have a tradition on Wednesday night that's not written in stone of Bible study. And it's important, I think, for Christians to study their Bible and often as they can, and it's important for Christians to get together. I understand that, for instance, during this COVID thing, High School Road would only meet once on the Lord's Day out of an attempt to avoid exposure as much as we could. But when all is, not necessarily all is well, but when we feel confident, we want to get together and study the Bible. We want to get together with one another. And I would think that Christians who love the Lord and love His Word would want to take advantage of every opportunity to study the Bible and to meet with other Christians and encourage them. If we lived close enough in a small village or something, I don't see anything wrong with meeting every day. I know a lot of churches in Africa that would meet for a morning prayer, and as many Christians as it could get there would meet, and they'd somebody, I don't know if it was preaching, but they'd talk about the Bible, they'd study, and they'd pray together, and then they'd all go to work. That's almost as good as some of the junk we do in the morning. We live too far apart from one another to do that, but there's nothing wrong with that. And I would think that Christians who love one another and who want to prefer one another, the Bible talks about that, would want to gather in that circumstance as much as they can. Now, if you can't, you can't. There's other obligations that come up that make it impossible. But anyway, you've been quiet. You've got 30 seconds to say what you want.
Let's remember our Wednesday night Bible study at 7:30.
Wednesday night, tomorrow night, we're studying 2 Peter, the 3rd chapter.
Sure. And we're going to meet again on Sunday. We're in 1 Timothy, as I mentioned earlier in the program.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll get everybody out to services on Sunday.
There you go. 1 Timothy, you're just starting first. You did the introduction.
I just barely got into the introduction.
On the last Lord's Day.
Yeah.
And the church meets at 3103 North High School Road in Indianapolis. 3103 North High School Road. 9:30 Bible class Sunday, 10:30 worship, again at 6 in the evening for worship. And we'll have a Bible study, as Alan mentioned, at 7:30 tomorrow night. We'd love to have you come out and be with us. If the Lord wills, we'll be back again next week, and hopefully you can gather with us tomorrow night. Good evening to you.